Hey everybody, providing you some instruction on lesson 5.4, percent of a quantity. So we're going to come back to word problems because I'm going to suggest a different approach for word problems unless you're really good at figuring out if we are indeed finding a percent of a quantity. Let's just do the simple stuff where they just tell you to find a percentage of some number. So in this case it's find 65% of 300. So a couple reminders. Remember, this means out of 100. And this word of means times. So this, we're just going to keep it the same. Alright, now if this means out of 100, that means we have to think about our favorite equivalent of 65%. So if we think about equivalents of 65%, there's 65 over 100, that's the equivalent. There's the decimal equivalent, which is equal to 65 hundredths. We could simplify 65 hundredths. Right, but you would choose your favorite equivalent and you would quite simply multiply it with 300. So in this example, let's say you had to show the algorithm for that. You might show 300 times 65 hundredths. And then you would go ahead and do the math. So here we get the 0, the 0, and the 15. And then we'll put a 0 to hold our place. And here we get the 0. Here we get the 0. And here we get the 18, and then we just add everything up. A little bit hard to write with a mouse, so I apologize that it's a little sloppy. Alright, and then the most important thing is remembering that this is a decimal. We have to go into, so that means we have to go into. So the answer is 195. Now if we had chosen to instead simplify this, or even just leave it as it is, and multiply it by 300, we would have gotten the same exact thing. Alright, now let's look at a word problem. I'm going to suggest the bar model approach if you feel at all confused about how to set this up, because we're going to be learning a different type of word problem when we study lesson 5.5, which will leave you a little mixed up. A typical family of 4 uses about 400 gallons of water each day, and 30% of this water is for outdoor activities such as gardening. How many gallons of water does a typical family use each day for outdoor activities? Now, if we're going to do a bar diagram, I call this, or a tape diagram some people call it, I like to make two different bars. One that's going to represent the actual numbers, and the other that will represent the percent. So when you have all of something, you have 100% of it. Now ask yourself, do we have the all of it numbers that represented here? They're talking about it uses about 400 gallons of water each day. So that's all the water they use in one day. So let's put that 400 gallons here. Now if we kind of visualize where 30% would be, and just kind of ballpark that, because 50% would be the halfway mark, so 30% might look something like this. 30%. And label that. They're talking about that being for outdoor activities. So I'm just going to label that OA, which stands for outdoor activities. Now we would need to know, they want to know the number, right? They want to know this as a number. How many gallons of water does a typical family use each day for outdoor activities? So we actually need the outdoor activity number. We're looking for this. So in other words, we need to find what 30% of 400 is. Now there'll be other types of questions where you'd have to figure out other stuff, like if you're 30% for outdoor use, and that means 70% would be for other use, other than outdoors, like indoor use, for example. But we're really finding 30% of 400. Now, keep in mind, one way to do that is to, let's write this down first. We're finding 30% of 400, which means that if we turn this into a decimal, that's equal to 3/10 or 30 hundredths, whatever you prefer. This is a little more user-friendly. That means multiply, and this, of course, would stay as 400. Now if we set this up and do the algorithm and do 400 times 3/10, which, keep in mind, is equal to 30%, we get the 0 here, we get the 0 here, we get the 12, and then we have to remember to go over 1, over 1. So that means that we're talking about 120 gallons that would be used for outdoor activities. Now if we needed the indoor use, do you see how we would subtract that from this and we'd be able to get that number? So the idea of using a tape diagram is often very helpful.